America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By honoring your sacred vocation of nursing, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. At Grand Canyon University, our online RN to BSN, MSN, or DNP degree programs allow you to balance online coursework with local in-person clinical, practicum, or immersion hours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. A lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, but I wanted more of this. So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Joining me today is author of psychological thrillers and practicing therapist, Ellie Monago. Hello.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about the new book, The Marriage Test, which is out in the UK on the 3rd of September. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it is a book about 4 couples who go on a reality TV show, presumably to save their marriages. But then there's all kinds of intrigue. And then there's kind of an Agatha Christie kind of element of like one dies and then who's next. So they're kind of sort of, I wouldn't say they're stranded there, but they become sequestered after the police arrive. So so they kind of are stranded there. And someone is a killer. We don't know if it's one of the couples or one of the staff of the show. So there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of possibilities.
Okay. I like how you little chuckle at the like, oh, they get sequestered there Agatha Christie style. That's one of those tropes where you're kind of like, in that setting, it's fine because we all know that the story is going to be better if everyone's stuck together.
Yes, you have to find a way. I mean, I think as an author, you're like, I have to find a way in this year or contemporary, if you write contemporary stuff, right? In a way, if you write historical, it can be easier because you don't have to deal with cell phones and social media and all of these things, right? But like to be truly stranded, it takes a little work, it takes a little doing now.
Yeah, to be like isolated as well, because like you say, it's too easy to just get a message out to someone beyond the immediate circle.
Yes.
Am I right in thinking that this is the 5th book that you've published, or have you published more?
I have published more in that. So there's the under as Ellie Monago, I have 2 that are from Amazon's Lake Union, and then I have the 3 that are from Bookouture, which have come out this year, with the Marriage Test being the 3rd. So that's 5 as Ellie Monago, and then I have I think it's 5 as Holly Brown, which is my well, not my given name, but my married name, so my actual name.
Right. And are they all psychological thrillers?
They are. I've written other books and I've had agents for other books, and things did not pan out, unfortunately. Like when we were out on submission, the agent had it out on submission, and then the pandemic hit, and then things shut down, and it wasn't publishing kind of tightened in a sense or should we still publish it? And it just, the timing didn't work out. So that was more sort of an upmarket women's fiction book that was out on submission then. And then I ended up sort of returning more to psychological thrillers because they're great fun. So not that upmarket women's fiction can't be great fun, but I do think that in my case, it's more fun to write psychological thrillers. So I kind of went that way, but I might want to sort of branch out again in the future. Who knows?
Okay. But you did release psychological thrillers under Holly Brown. So I'm wondering, usually people take a pen name because they're writing in a different genre. How come you were prompted to take a pen name?
Back when my first Ellie Monago book came out, which was with Lake Union, that was Neighborly, called Neighborly. And it was because in sort of traditional publishing, you're pretty much only doing a book a year. And my agent and I spoke about the fact that I like to write a lot. And so an idea that she had was that I could also be writing under a pen name, and that like Union might be a good fit for me at that time. And so it was an idea that she had in order to kind of keep up more with my pacing and also, make more money while doing so. So that was how that originally came about.
Okay. So the Holly Brown stuff was traditionally published?
Yes. So that was, those were with HarperCollins.
Okay. And then so you wanted this as like an additional thing on a different, but it was fine if you did it with a different name. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. That makes sense.
Yes.
And speaking of writing quickly, you mentioned 3 books came out this year with Bookager.
Yes. So one of the things I really love with traditional publishing, I guess, is that they want a longer lead time because they're trying to get more like traditional media as well, right? Like they're trying to get more publicity, and so Bookageur's model and a lot of digital publishing's model is different in that they're not looking for that traditional coverage, So they do some marketing, but they do less of traditional PR. The difference being that, the PR would again involve more lead time and having to pitch to various outlets. So Bookouture does less of that. And so they require less of a ramp up. They require less of a lead time. So it allows for, if someone sort of is into what you're doing, then the next one can come pretty quickly on the heels. So which is great for me, again, in terms of pacing.
How long do you think on average it takes you to write a novel from kind of inception to first draft going to editor?
Probably about 2 months.
Wow. That's really fast.
Yeah. Well, and there might be a lot of changes that come after that first draft, but the coming up, I think I have a lot of ideas. I have a very long idea folder, and so I pitch a lot of ideas, and then I love the collaboration so I love collaborating with an agent, and I don't have an agent anymore now. I collaborate with just my editor at Bookature, but the ability to just kind of like fire off a lot of ideas, and then they say get going, and then I sort of sit down and start mapping out. So I'll think often of a situation, and then I'll think of who would believably be in that situation, because I feel like you have to when sort of things that seem like they might be outlandish are happening in a thriller, I think it's important that those things derive from who the person is, like that it would be outlandish for perhaps you or me, to do that thing. But the character that I've created, it has to be believable within their psychology. That to me is what makes for a good psychological thriller, is that things don't come they can be surprising, but they don't come out of left field, because they should come out of authentically who that character is and the high stress urgency of the situation.
Okay. So the kind of inception point for your stories is a setting or like a thing happening. It's not a character or a theme.
Right. I'll think of a situation, think of a premise, and then I will think of who I want to put in there to put into that situation. And I'll also think, if I already had plot twists in mind, it sounds funny, but I have to write the psychology to the twist in a certain sense, because otherwise it doesn't flow from who they are. And that's important to me, because I having done therapy for a long time, like I often hear things that I am like, if you just heard this out of context, right, you'd be like, what's going on there? But I know them in context, I know them in terms of how they grew up. I know in terms of, and so it's not, again, it's not out of left field in therapy, and I don't want it to be out of left field in my novels either.
Okay, right. So from that kind of initial situation that you've thought of, do you then kind of plan out the whole thing from that, or do you just start writing and see where it goes?
I used to do less planning. Now I do a lot more outlining. I don't know, there wasn't a decision made really, but I just noticed it was just happening, that I was tending to have longer and longer kind of descriptions of what's going to happen at various points in the story. And so there's more planning now, but then in terms of breaking it down into actual individual scenes, that happens more as I go. And I always like to know 4 to 5 scenes out. So I have general sense of where the book is headed, but I like to have at the beginning of each page, I'll sort of have chapter 3. This is the scene in chapter 3, chapter 4. This is the scene, and so I'm never looking at a blank page, and that helps psychologically. That helps me to sit down and I have a purpose and a plan, but I only plan so far out. But like I said, I have an overall vision of the novel and the plotting.
Right. Is that how you've always approached the writing process, or is that something that has evolved over time as you've kind of written more?
I've always done it where I'm at least 3 scenes out, but I didn't used to have as strong of an overall arc, or as detailed of an overall arc. So I might sort of have in mind, here's where I want the book to end, and generally speaking, some of the beats of the story. But like I said, I used to start with like a 2-page description of kind of what would be happening. And now it can be a 15 or 20-page description of what's going to happen in the story. So, but the always looking out at least 3 chapters, that's been something that's always been true.
Okay. Right. It's not fully like mapped out and planned, but there's definitely a structure ahead of you going in, and you're not writing completely blind here.
Right. And I think some people might enjoy more of it's not that there's not a sense of possibility, because I can be surprised within a scene like that. I think it's going to take a certain, it's going to have a certain cadence, or like it can change within that scene. And then I might change what comes in the next scene potentially, or the scene, so I might change things, but I can imagine that I think some people probably enjoy a blank page more than I do, so I don't know what it says about me. Like I want to sit down with at least an initial, but some people might really like to be like, where do I want to go today? I don't know if that's what some people do, but it's not my makeup to do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've said this all the time, but writing is about finding the way that works for you. And I've had as many authors on here say that they plan things out, or they like plan ahead to some degree, as I've had authors who say, no, I literally just sit down and just start writing and see where it takes me.
Mm-hmm. And I would be curious if there are personality correlations to that, that if it turns out there's certain, how high strung you are, how much you have to know it, how controlling you are. It's an interesting question of like, if you're looking at these like personality traits and seeing how they correlate, but yeah, or if there's no correlation at all, it could be. But
the one correlation I would say that I have heard people mention frequently is that often, like a debut novel, or like the early stages of writing, authors tend to kind of pants a lot more, so they don't plan it as much. Mm-hmm. Once authors the more they write, the more they kind of work within the publishing system. I think they generally, even if they're still mostly not planning, they do have more plans than they would have previously. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
It does make sense.
And that's more to do with deadlines and things, which didn't exist prior to being in publishing.
Right. And it might also have to do with more inputs, like in terms of knowing what your agent wants, or your editor wants, or, and so you you're writing a little more to spec in a sense,
Yeah, exactly.
And the freedom of like, nobody's, because there's a way that it's kind of both freeing and scary before you enter the system. Like, I think if you're just home and writing, you write, if you've been reading also, you maybe have been studying, or, how other people do things. And maybe you do have more of a strategic mindset, but at least for me in the beginning, it was more like, oh, this is just where I want to go. This is just what I want to produce. And I hope, right. And I hope that people will love it, in the way that I do. And then as you get deeper in, you get, you do get more strategic in some ways, in terms of thinking, what do people want to buy? What do people, what do people like? What do people want to buy from me? What does my editor want to buy from me? Thinking what the readers will want to buy as well. So there's different considerations that enter into it.
Absolutely, yeah. How long were you kind of in that space of writing and submitting before you kind of got a foot in the door? Whether that was with like a book deal or signing with an agent.
Yeah, so I think my first books were chick lit, and that was under my birth name. And so there were two of those. And that was when, so I'm now almost 50, and that was when I was about 27, were the two chicklet books. And then I didn't have an identity as a writer for a long time. I think I didn't fall out in a bad way with my agent, but there was a sense that like she didn't know how to direct me, and I didn't know quite what I wanted to do. And I had gotten that that the book deal for that came really easily, and it was very misleading in a way how easy it was. Like I basically I was like laid off from a job, and I had like 6 weeks free, and I said, oh, I'm gonna, like, I never really read chick lit, but I was like, I think I'm gonna write a chick lit book. I mean, it was really there was a lot of hubris in the thing. I said, I'll just sit down and write this thing, and I'll amuse myself. And I amused myself. And then I said, okay, now I'll go and I'll try to get an agent. And so I queried like 10 people, and I got like a few offers, and I went with the person I liked, and it all moved really fast. And it wasn't a lot of money or anything like that, but it was with a big 5 publisher. And so I think that when we sort of broke off, I kind of thought, well, it's a very easy thing to get agents. So this is not a problem at all. I didn't try to hang on to her. I didn't try to say, well, should I come back to you? I just, I just sort of said, okay. And then I kind of drifted around, and I wrote a number of different things, and and then I was submitting to different people, and I was like, this is not working out at all. It turns out what people said is true. This is really hard. And I think Gone Girl came out, right? And then I think that changed a lot of things for a lot of people, because it basically developed, it created the genre of domestic suspense, which was very well suited to me because of the fact that I'm a marriage and family therapist. And so domestic stuff is my, that's my wheelhouse. So I think then I developed more of a sense of what I wanted to.
Fall's here, and so are incredible sales at Tanger Outlets. Find must-have handbags, footwear, and all the latest fall arrivals, all at unbeatable savings. Shop top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, Gap Outlet, Coach, and even more brands you love. Save more every time you shop with deals up to 70% off. Tanger Outlets, always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at tanger.com.
To write, and so then I was just driving to work one day, and there was I heard on NPR, I heard this story, and it gave me this idea for what I wanted to do. And then that process went really well, like in terms of that submission was one where like I'm getting offers from like really great agents, and and that one moved, but I hadn't gotten an offer for 4 books before that. It had been just wandering in the desert for a while there. And then that, I got my agent for that. And then it was sort of starting up again. So in a way, it's, I guess that's a very long answer. I suppose what it is that was the time where I suddenly realized, oh, you don't want to lose an agent again. And you don't want to take anything for granted, and you want to write to the market if you need to stay in it. And so that was when I really got that it was a business in a way that I had not understood the first time around.
Right. But having said that, you did part with your agent because you said you don't have an agent currently.
Correct. So then that agent who I adore, we worked together for those 5 books, and she is someone who doesn't actually do much she doesn't do many psychological thrillers. And the book I queried her for was, in a way, they were calling everything the next Gone Girl at that point. And so I think that it was positioned as if this is Gone Girl meets ... but it really wasn't. It was much more of a like suspenseful family drama. And as we sort of went along, and I was writing more of like, I was writing, there was not there's less emotion, but in a way there was. I think that was a more emotional book. That was called Don't Try to Find Me. And that was a more emotional book. And I think that as I started writing more of sort of straight psychological thrillers, I wouldn't have been the client she would have taken on. Like if I was querying her for a straight psychological thriller, I don't know that she would have offered me representation. So there was a point we reached where I wanted to do, and I had ideas for sort of ambitious, strange psychological thrillers. And she just didn't have enthusiasm for them. And so we had a conversation. It was a great conversation. And I think very highly of her because she basically just was saying, you know, I don't want to tell you to write to what I want for you. Right. And so, and she had a lot of faith that I would find someone who wanted to represent what I wanted to write. And I was scared about it. I was sort of scared to be back out on the market. You know, it's kind of like if you break up in any sort of relationship and you like go looking and you're, you know, you get scared. And the truth is that I did not end up finding another agent relationship like her. That is in fact true. Like I had 2 agents after that. And like I said, one was trying to sell the contemporary women's fiction. And then another person was selling a book that actually now is The Marriage Test, interestingly. So she was trying to sell that, and then we parted ways. And then I had another agent who was for the contemporary women's fiction. And then, and neither of those ended up being that romance of the other agent. So, you know, and I ended up going to Bookature where you can go unagented. You can just submit to them directly. So that's sort of where I am now.
Oh, okay, right. Had you sort of reached a point where you were like, this agent thing's not working out, I'm just going to see, you know, what are my options without an agent?
Yes, I think if my agent for Don't Try to Find Me and all the other HarperCollins books, if she was taking me back, I would work with her. But I think if what I was doing was what she wanted to sell. But I think the other experiences, one was strange where she ended up it was the pandemic and she was stressed out and she had little kids at home and she was paring down her list. And it was, I don't have there's nothing there, there's no ill will. Mm-hmm. The other agent, was actually a legitimately bad experience and, which I hadn't had any, legitimately bad experiences up until that time. And maybe it soured me a little bit, but I think depending, what I want to write again. So if I end up wanting to do upmarket, you know, women's fiction again, and then I want a big 5 publisher, because that's what you do, because digital publishing, that's not what they're good at, you know, generally speaking. Like upmarket, you still want a big 5, I think. Unless you can do self-publishing, which I can't because I don't have that sort of marketing drive and that's just not my personality. But I think if you do want just upmarket fiction, then I do still think you want to go for a big 5. And in order to get in, the gatekeepers are agents. And so if I do end up writing something like that, I will be back on the agent. I'll be back in the agent hunt. You know, at that point, I do have contacts because I have a lot of people who've like considered me. And even if they said, not this project, you can come back to me. So I fortunately, I don't think I'll be right back in the slush pile. Like I think I have contacts in the industry. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if I can do it without, and just having that strong relationship with my editor at, you know, like I do at Bookature, then that's a great way for me. But as you know, from talking to so many people and, as other authors have talked about on your show, right, that there's a lot of different paths and there's a lot of variables that have to do with who you are and what you want to write and what relationships you want to have. And, you know, so there's a lot of complexity to the business in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've spoken to a number of authors on, from Bookature as well. And I think it's quite a lot of the authors at Bookature don't have agents because just the way that their business works and operates, it's very easy. They make everything very easy, and they're very like responsive and interactive, is what I've heard.
Yeah. I think in a way, if you have a good, strong collaborative relationship with your editor there, it takes away some of the need for the agent, because I think mm-hmm. A lot of times your agent is your collaborator, you know. Mm-hmm. So so you don't need to do that quite as, you know, you don't need to sort of duplicate the relationships in that way.
And Bookature, I imagine this is probably more of a digital first thing than explicitly a Bookature thing, but you're much more likely to get multi-book deals from the digital first publishers than from the traditional publishers who are looking to do physical print runs.
Yes. I think there's a lot less stress to the bookature model in a way because they're not giving you an advance up front, So I think that they can take chances on you and wait for you to hit. Whereas I think, so you can get a much longer runway to find your audience. Whereas I think with traditional publishing, it's pretty stressful in terms of like, are you going to hit? And if you don't hit, especially if they give you a big advance, in the beginning, you can feel almost blackballed. It's can be pretty stressful. I have a number of friends in situations like where they were like excited to get that big splashy, it's a big splashy debut, and then it doesn't find its audience, and then they're just adrift. They can get dropped by their agent. They can, you know what I mean? They just, so it's like, of course, it's always nice to get paid well up front, but if what you want is longevity in the business, and for me, that's extremely important, is longevity, because I truly, like, I know there's that quote about writers like having written, they don't necessarily like writing. And I love writing. I really do. And it helps my mental health is better when I'm writing, and I want it to go out into the world, and so for me, just kind of having continuity is really important, less so in a way than like I have to make that big payday. It's more like if I can have consistent paydays throughout, that's great, and if I can just kind of keep at it, and keep having that collaboration, with people who care about what I'm doing and who make it better, then that's a great situation for me.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a safety in being the kind of author that consistently is making, a decent return commercially on the books, as opposed to, like you say, there's so much pressure if you, on your debut novel, get a huge, like, bookseller announces that you have a huge deal for your first book. The amount of pressure on that book now to perform is so high. And if it doesn't, so many authors are then kind of just, that's it. It's very difficult to find a new deal because, especially with that publisher, they've spent so much money. If it's a traditional publisher, they've spent so much money on the advance and everything that's gone into that. And if the book hasn't made the return, then it's hard to like get their attention again.
Yeah, it can feel like a bit of a punitive industry in a strange way, right? Because there's a lot of reasons why a book doesn't succeed that don't actually have to do with the quality of the book itself. And there's books that succeed that are not, in my opinion, of very good quality. And there's a lot of, serendipity to it and timing. And if your book hit it the right, there's a lot to it and that you don't control, but you can be treated as if it was within your control, and you can be treated as if like you let them down on a certain level, right? And people don't say that to you directly, but there's a feeling that you were a failed investment, and that's, it's a bad feeling, and you're not sure what else you could have really done differently for it, So it can be a stressful industry. I mean, I think one of the things that alleviates my stress quite a bit is that I also have my private practice, and it's not a day job for me, in that I really like that too, and so I think that takes a lot of the stress off too. It's not like I'm like, it is a passion for me to write, but it's not my only passion, professionally speaking, and I do feel really fortunate for that, because I know if that's the thing for you, right, and other things are just a day job, then so much is right. It's really hard to keep perspective in that way. Your whole heart is in that, and it sounds weird, but I don't have to have my whole heart in it too, and I don't have to have my mortgage payment dependent on it, which is really a relief, because it's an uncertain business, so yeah,
of course. A friend of mine said to me the other day, actually, because most authors do have a second job, and I wanted to come back onto this later, but a friend of mine said to me the other day, you can someone had told her that you can only consider quitting your job and doing writing novels full time when your advance is triple your salary. Oh, and I thought, that's probably about where you'd need to be to not be stressing about the amount of money you would or would not be making by consistently getting book deals.
Yeah, and it would be good to also have a job you could potentially return to if the advances dry, right? How many of those advances can you get in a row? It's not right, because it depends what happened with the book.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
It's, you can't really count on the next advance is the scary bit, right? Like I almost don't know. Like I know people who sold a lot of books and made a lot of money, and they're not secure either in a way. They can end up back at it's not square one. They have some name but there's a feeling, right, that you're never quite sure. And there's some writers obviously who reach a level, a sort of status and stature that they can be that secure. But I don't know what percentage I'd give it, but I'm curious, what percentage would you give it? Like what percentage of writers do you think actually are at that level where they can say, I will consistently for the rest of my life be able to keep getting these advances and be able to live a good life?
I don't know if it's necessarily advances, because the other thing I've heard is that at a certain point, which is probably around 5 or 6 published novels, there is like if you're kind of, I guess if you are continually putting stuff out, just the kind of back catalogue of royalties should be, hopefully that's giving you a decent enough recurring revenue. But it also depends what we're counting as writers, because if we're counting only writers who have published, or are we counting like writers who are like have agents but maybe haven't published, or writers who have written but aren't? If we're just counting writers that have published, I think it's still a tiny percentage. I think it's really, really small.
That would be my guess as well.
Yeah. Anyway, we are at the point in the episode where we head over to the desert island, and I ask you, Ellie, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
I was thinking that this is probably a strange choice, because I feel like on a certain level it should be a novel, seeing as I write them. But I was thinking that what might be interesting is there's a culture critic. I think her name is Emily Nussbaum, and she has a book called I Like to Watch, and it's actually all her writing about TV. I know it sounds odd, but I was thinking it would be because you would have a yearning for, to remember other things, right? And TV is so evocative. Like she has, I think her first essay in there might be about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is very evocative for someone of my age, and there's stuff about The Sopranos, and there's stuff about Girls, and just all these different TV shows. And in a funny way, I thought like reading about would still make me feel like part of the culture. Like take me back, take me off my island, take me back to the world.
That's a really cool answer. I've never not had an answer like that before, because you'd be you wouldn't necessarily be in the current zeitgeist, but you'd be able to like you say, be in the culture and kind of jump through decades.
Yes, it takes me through my life. Because I'm like, where was I when I watched that episode of? So like, it would tie me to like where I was and who I was watching things with and who I used to talk about to you. Because it used to be, I don't know if this seems true to you, but like it feels like I used to talk to people about TV and movies much more than I do now. I'm not sure why that is.
I think it's because there was far less to watch. So everyone was watching the same things. Whereas now there's an absurd amount of choice of things to watch. So it's very difficult for everyone to be on the same wavelength and watching the same thing until like something like a Game of Thrones or whatever it is comes along, and that captures kind of everyone's attention.
Right. That's probably true. Like things were like an event where you watched them at that time. Like we started being able to tape things, but then pass the tapes around. It was like, things were an event. Like there used to be like, I don't think this water cooler TV, I don't think that's a thing. And
you were bound by the fact that if it was on a Thursday night, everyone was watching it on Thursday night, as opposed to, something comes out on Netflix and everyone's watching it whenever they want or whenever they have time. You're not all coming into work the next day. Yes.
And then if you're not on social media, like I'm not really on social media, because I assume that people are still doing that, where they're all talking about something that they just saw, right? Like the new season dropped and now everybody binged and I can see how that's actually really fun, because I do feel like it used to be that like the day after something, you would all be talking about it, like the water cooler idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a cool and original answer to that question. I really like that. Next up, I am going to ask some questions about the influence of being a therapist, what that has on your writing, finding work-life writing balance, and advice for people starting out in publishing. But that's going to be in the extended episode exclusive to my wonderful Patreon subscribers.
Because there's just so much information out there, right? About like what questions you ask a potential agent about. So just be a really informed consumer.
Yes, I think that is great. Very approachable advice as well, something that everyone can do. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Ellie. It's been really interesting chatting with you, and really fun hearing about everything you've been up to, how kind of your work and writing and publishing experience has been. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. You're great at what you do. I just want to mention, your interviewing style is awesome. It's really a comfortable, wonderful time to talk with you. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. And by the time this airs, Ellie's new book, The Marriage Test, will be out, so you can go get it in all the usual places. To support the podcast, like, follow, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Join the Patreon for free content and subscribe for ad-free extended episodes. Thanks again, Ellie, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.
Hey, y'all, Darius Rucker here. A lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.
Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.